Hello and welcome to the Ragamuffin Speaks. Don't you just love it when you record a 13-minute vlog and then it doesn't save and the file corrupts and you get annoyed? Never mind. Okay, so people seem to want to watch me speak and hear my voice and stuff for some reason. So here I am recording another vlog. I have some questions. Deja vu. I've done this all before once. I have some questions in my ask box that I still have to answer. So I thought rather than type out the answers, I would talk out the answers because that would be quicker, unless the video didn't save. And now I have to say it all again and try to remember what I said. Yeah. Anyway, Wendybird asks, what are your thoughts on how the current generation in the Western world interacts with politics and the media? Most of the younger set gets news from online sources or from satirical news programs. Do you feel this has negative or positive results? Yes, it definitely has negative or positive results. One of the two. Okay, what was I going to say? I think in the last couple of years, or the last 18 months maybe, I've seen young people get a heck of a lot more involved and interested politically than they have been for a long time, and certainly more than my generation are or were. My generation grew up under Thatcher and got very disillusioned with the political process as a whole because of that. We got to a point, I think, where the political establishment was so far detached from who and what we were that we didn't care. I did. I mean, I've always been interested in politics. We did a mock election at school, and I ran as Labour Party candidate in a grammar school in Kent. I didn't win. But that essentially came down to not even a popularity contest, because everybody hated the other guy as well, but who could come up with the funniest ads to plaster around the sixth form common room. But yeah, so I lost that, and nobody really cares anyway, because nobody cared about politics, because it was boring and uninteresting and had nothing to do with us, and was completely out of touch. And then of course Tony Blair came along, and everyone got very excited because people thought, at last, here's a real change. Here's something new. Here's something dynamic. Here's something, and I think a lot of people got disappointed because, ironically enough, the Tories and the Tory press had told us that he was a liar. Had told us that New Labour was a sham. That once they got into power, they would their socialist roots would show, and they would do all of the things that everybody suspected that the Labour Party always wanted to do. They'd renationalise everything and all of that. And then of course they didn't, despite having a huge political mandate, despite having a huge majority in the House where they could literally pass anything they wanted. They didn't, because they actually were the moderates that they claimed to be, which was a bit sad, really, I think, personally. Ironically, considering that, Blair has since been tarred with the accusation of being a liar, especially over Iraq, which I think people have a fair point, but the record in general, other than that, of New Labour was very good in government. But I think that contributed then to at the last general election here, people having the view that all the parties were the same. It really didn't matter who you voted for, and that we might as well give the other guys a go, because ultimately they were all the same. And I've discussed this on my blog previously about how, to a certain extent, certainly when it comes to economic policy, the Labour Party had accepted that socialist economic theory had failed, especially in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so had essentially adopted the capitalist conservative economic model, and so it became more about social issues rather than economic issues, the differences between parties. But anyway, the Tories got in effectively at the last election, and I think that was a wake up for a lot of people, as they certainly for the younger generation who don't remember Thatcher, were able to suddenly go, wait a minute, no, there is a difference. There is a very clear difference between what we had before and what we have now, and this is not good. And so we've seen a rise in the engagement politically of the younger generation, which is hopefully a good thing. Excuse me. Talking about younger people getting their news from online sources, I think there are, in some ways, it's a great thing. Some ways, it's wonderful that the youth in general, through sources like Tumblr and Twitter, are able to find out what's going on in the world and to get their news often before it hits the mainstream news media, and without the filter of the mainstream news media. So there is sometimes less of a political spin on it, but there are problems with that. You look at the recent Coney 2012 thing, where because that wasn't filtered through the mainstream news media, because it wasn't critically examined by journalists before being presented to people, people took it at face value. People accepted it for what it said it was, despite the fact that Coney hadn't been in Uganda for 6 years, and the charity only spent 30% of of what was given to them on work in Uganda, which are extremely troubling issues and would have been caught if that story had been filtered through the mainstream news media rather than just spreading virally across the net. So yes, there is a problem with that. When it comes to satirical news programs, that's not a new thing at all. There's a great tradition of people getting their political news, for want of a better word, through satirical news programs from the 60s. That was the week that was, through to, in the 80s, Spitting Image. In the 90s, Have I Got News for You, which rumbles on and on and on, to the 10 o'clock live now, and in the US, The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. And I think some of the best journalism on American news at the moment is being done by the Daily Show and The Colbert Report, because they are not afraid to just call a spade and call people out and say these people are lying to you and this is why, whereas the mainstream news doesn't like to be quite so forthright and clear with its editorializing. That's the word I'm looking for. Although Fox News will happily editorialize and lie to you till the cows come home. So no, I think it's a great thing, and I know that growing up in the 80s, Spitting Image was a huge part of me becoming politically aware, and I think satire will always play that very important role in society of being a gateway for people into becoming politically aware and presenting serious issues to people in a way that is engaging and amusing, and entertaining, but also challenging. Okay, so that's a big heavy bit. Lighter question now, from an anon. If you could spend a day with any superhero, who would you choose and what would you do? I would spend the day with Kitty Pryde, and what would we do? Yes, moving on to the next question. It's another anon. What do you think our generation will be remembered for? Not any specific generation, just considering the people who live now as a whole. What will history make of us? I went on quite at length in the previous version of this, but I'll try to be a little more focused with this. I think there are two main big things that our generation, as in the people alive at the moment, will be remembered for. We are the generation that firstly is making the transition from offline life to online life, from a point where When I was a kid, people didn't have computers. I remember us getting a ZX81, and most people didn't have one. People didn't have computers. I remember the internet coming in and that being a new weird thing, and very few people are online. And now we are getting to a point where they're becoming ubiquitous. Computers are everywhere, and in our pockets. And online life and the internet is not something you go and do for a little while. And it's like, I'm just going to spend a couple of hours on the internet. It's become integral to life, to everything that we do, to ordering a pizza, to ordering concert tickets, to as we're transitioning to cloud-based apps rather than using programs installed on your hard drive. If you're writing an essay, if you're writing a novel, if you're doing some artwork, anything and everything, anything you can do on a computer, and even more stuff is being done online, and so we're increasingly reaching a point where we live an online life rather than an offline life. And I think the second big thing, and it hasn't happened yet, but it will be 20 to 50 years from now, according to physicists, will be the introduction of nuclear fusion power, and that we will be the generation that transfers from sorry, ordering my thoughts here. It flowed actually better the last time. But yeah, from going from fossil fuel, dependence on fossil fuel and limited and relatively expensive energy, to using nuclear fusion power, and therefore having effectively limitless and cheap, if not free, energy. So we will, and that will radically alter society and radically alter the world. And I think the two go hand in hand together, because I think the online life is still in its infancy while it's being powered by fossil fuel and this limited, expensive energy. But once you couple that with limitless, effectively free energy, it becomes globally ubiquitous. And I think that is when, and I'm going to get really techie here, that's when you start to get, and we're still in the beginnings of it, but that's when you really start to get a global culture. And nationhood starts to break down, and that's when we become, I think it's termed as a type 1 civilization. We're not even type 1, type 0 civilization. I'm a type 1 civilization, and we start to expand out off the planet, which is radical. So there, that's what I think ultimately this generation will be remembered for. The transition from offline to online life, and the transition from limited, expensive fossil fuel derived power to limitless, effectively free nuclear fusion based power. And that, I think, both coupled together will see us transition to be a type 1 civilization. There, that's a bit deep. I hope you've enjoyed that and got something out of it, and haven't bored you too much with the political and scientific ramblings and stuff. I mean, who the hell am I? What do I know? It's all a load of gibberish. Until next time, bye bye.